Can you say sketchy? I finally got it here. It took an hour too long, but I have to build that still because I didn't have an engine stand to put it on. Anyways, I want to talk a little bit about LS's, AMC motor mounts, oil pans, and oil pumps, and this motor, I guess. So I need to get that built. I'll get it up on the engine hoist so it doesn't fall down and crush me, and we'll do a little looking at it. Okay, so this is the original LS I started with in this car. It's a 2007 4.8. I know they say 4.8 and 5.3, but this one is a 4.8. It's got like 109,000 miles or so on it. Unfortunately, the rig it was in was just too far gone to continue on the road, so I bought the rig, pulled this motor, and this was hooked up to the 4L80E that's in the car. And all the wiring, the computer, everything out of that van is what I used to build that drivetrain with. But anyways, this is a good motor, but we already knew we were going to do supercharged, and about 115 miles an hour this motor kind of just was about at its end there. I mean, it didn't have much more to go. It was already at high RPMs and kind of at its limit, I think, of what it could do for stroke and power. But it's got flat top pistons and 4.8 aluminum heads. Have a little bit more compression to them because this came out of a 3/4 ton van. And but anyways, we're going to do the supercharger, and we didn't want the high compression for the boost and all that good stuff. So I ended up pulling this out because we got this 6-liter, and the 6-liter engine has like 223,000 or so miles on it. It was also in one of our rigs, and it had a really bad clatter. Like, you could start it up, it would run fine, but as soon as you got over 2,500 RPM and drove it for 3 or 4 minutes in that range, it would start clattering really bad on the passenger side. Just really super bad, like just horrible noise. And you could stop, shut the rig off and wait 10-15 minutes, fire it up, and it would start rattling again. Or it would actually quit rattling until you go over 2,500 RPM, and then it would start rattling again, and then it wouldn't matter what RPM you're in, it would just rattle really bad. And took it to a few shops. They told us the cam bearings were spun because it had oil pressure, but not real good oil pressure. It idled at like 10 psi, and when you would drive down the road, it would jump up to 40 and then go all the way down to 20, and then sometimes it'd jump up to 60 and then back down to 20. But you know, it had weird oil pressure, but we thought maybe it was the oil pressure switch, because those kind of have a tendency to be goofy on these LS's. But anyways, they retired this engine. I bought the motor, and somebody else claimed the transmission before I could get it. Got the motor home, kind of went through it, pulled the heads off, and those heads that are actually on that motor are off of the 6-liter. Looked it over, checked rod bearings, checked pistons for wear, just checked for metallic in the oil. Nothing. Just couldn't find any wearable part. So I put it back together, got it up and running and everything, and this was before a supercharger. Still had the truck intake, and you know, it ran pretty good for about a week. Never had problems. Get it up to 5,000 RPM, and it was fine. But then it started making that noise again. I tried everything. I put thicker oil in it, whatever I could do, because it had oil pressure, and I have a mechanical gauge, and it was showing 20 pounds at idle and up to 40, 45 at high RPMs. And Talked to a few other buddies that worked at the Chevy dealership, and they told me the same thing. It's either the cam bearings are bad or the front plate that goes over your cam. I think the thrush plate is what they call it. There's a O-ring that goes right here is bad, and it's bypassing oil through those channels to the lifters. So anyways, being cheap, I decided to just buy a thrush plate. I put it on, had my fingers crossed, that's what it was. Started up the motor, drove it around for about 5 miles, started doing it again. Came back and just was not going to pull the motor to check the cam bearings and all that stuff. So then I got to the option too, maybe the lifters on that side of the engine are just bad. Maybe they just went bad. So I bought a brand new set of lifters for the whole entire engine. It was pretty expensive, like $400 or $500. Put them in, started the car, drove it for about 5-10 minutes. It didn't actually start really making a noise, but you could hear it coming. It started clattering a little bit. So I came back again and I said, you know, I just can't imagine it's the cam bearings in this thing, but because I put a stage 3 Brian Tui cam, and when I put the cam in it, I kind of looked at the cam bearings and they were fine. I couldn't see any reason, I couldn't see any noticeable wear making me worry that the cam bearings were bad in that motor. So anyways, somebody told me maybe you should put an oil pump in it. So that's why this motor is tore apart in the front. Because I robbed the thrush plate off of this because I thought maybe I had a defective thrush plate. Well, this thrush plate was not in very good shape after I pulled it off. The little O-ring, orange O-ring was kind of deteriorated a little bit, so I didn't even try it. But I pulled the oil pump off this because this motor always had fantastic oil pressure. Always worked good, no problem. So I pulled the oil pump off of this motor, put it in this motor, started it up, drove it around, and it actually quit making a noise. But if you would go somewhere to a car show, turn it off and start it up, you'd have no oil pressure for like 30 seconds. And then it would get oil pressure, but it was kind of erratic. It was kind of weird. And then I thought, well, maybe I tore that O-ring right there and it was sucking air or something crazy in there. And then bought another oil pump, a Milling brand. I started putting it on, and then another guy come over. He goes, you know, you got to shim those. I said, what do you mean? He goes, you have to shim those oil pumps. You can't just put them on and assume they're good. And I was looking in the manual I had, and it talks nothing about shimming oil pumps or anything about it. Neither did the directions with that Milling oil pump. But sure enough, I jumped on YouTube. There is a good video on there that tells you exactly how to take feeler gauges and shim it. Tore that old oil pump apart, looked in it, sure enough the gears had grinded, it was off-centered. So the gears grinded into it, and that's why it had no oil pressure at times and had erratic oil pressure. It wasn't the O-ring, it wasn't any of that. It was because I didn't shim it, and it ate into itself. Put that Milling one on there, shimmed it. I have never had an oil problem ever again in this engine. No sort of fluctuations, nothing. It idles at about 35 psi, and 65 is what it puts out at a high rev. So, and I didn't buy a high flow oil pump. I just bought a regular Milling brand one. But anyway, so that was the reason I thought I'd bring oil pumps up to you, because even though everybody told me cam bearings, I started leaning towards cam bearings. It turned out to just be an oil pump failure, and that's probably originally what was wrong with that 6-liter. It probably just had a bad oil pump, and I threw that oil pump away, so I never got to look at it before I did anything else. So when I was getting this motor dug out of storage, I found one of my original mock-ups I was making, because I knew I had to slightly bend the motor mount to fit the LS. On these ones here, I think I cut them and welded them at a funny angle, or I didn't have the means to bend them or something. I don't remember why. And then I added a couple extra pilot holes and some other stuff onto this, and this one's labeled right, so I opened up those holes too. And I think I had to open those holes up for the bolts on the LS, but anyways, so there's no modification done to these ears other than opening up the holes for the bolts. This side here, which that's probably why I didn't use this motor mount to begin with, because it would need some more tweaking done to it, but that's how far I had to kind of bend over the sides on those. But I think what I did on the AMX, I think I took it to a buddy shop. We heated it up with a torch, and actually he had a big giant vise, and then we kind of just crunched this whole thing over, and then we heated up this ear and torched it and maneuvered it. But the ones on the AMX, they fit flawlessly. I'm sure I was having issues with these, because that's why I never continued on with them. But I have both of them. I couldn't find the other one right off the bat, but this one here was just laying on the floor, so thought I'd grab it and just kind of show you why they, you know, how they go on there. But I don't remember why I did pilot or had to drill other holes. I don't believe I did any of that on that motor, but unless, you know, this works better on the left hand side, I don't know. But as I said, soon enough I'll be pulling the motor out of that, and we can take a look at my motor mounts and see exactly what I did on that setup there, and have a final idea, since I can't remember exactly what I've done. But anyway, so I was going to show that. And then oil pans. So the Holley 302, it's 302 dash something, I don't remember exactly. But this oil pan I used on the AMX for about a year, because this is the same oil pan that was on this motor. There's only one time I scraped it, and it hung out. The cross member comes right about this level here, and that's the 302 one. See, they basically cut that sump off there, and then they kind of dropped this a little further, so it's still a 6-quart capacity, and I think maybe this is a little wider or something down here. But you can use a truck oil pan on it. It does hang down that much further past your cross member, and I didn't have front shocks on that car for until I went to Bonneville Salt Flats. Just drove it with no shock absorbers on it at all. So there's a good chance I may have never hit anything, and the only reason I hit that is because I was doing like 100 miles an hour on the interstate, and our interstates are notorious for having hoops and really fast divots and stuff in the interstate on the straightaways, and I hit something really fast, and the whole front of the car just sank down and came up, and I heard it hit, but it never leaked oil, never did anything, so I never did nothing about it. But since I put the 6-liter and was trying to be a little bit more professional than being cheap, I got the right oil pan. People ask me about the Camaro, the F-body oil pans. They won't work. I did get a bunch of diagrams and measurements sent to me from like Summit and a couple other places about them, and they won't work. Something about they'll actually hit the cross member if you use those, if you're using the stock AMC stuff, and I think they're longer, so they won't clear the cross member either. But I couldn't use an F-body. Same thing, I didn't make too many notes, I just didn't. I saw the measurements, I did all the calculating, it just wouldn't work. So like I said, the Holley for the Nova, I think is what it's specific for. The LS Nova swap is the oil pan I used on that, and it fits flawless, no problems at all. So on this 4.8 motor, the wife wants to kind of build it and put it in the Gremlin, and I don't mean build it like soup it up, I mean just put it back together and put it in the Gremlin, because she's smart and she already knows it. she'd get in a lot of trouble or hurt herself probably with a souped up engine. So this is a 5.3 liter sitting here, and it runs fine. But I don't know, the 4.8's got less miles on it. This one's got almost 200,000, and I don't know too much about this motor. It actually came from our other corporation office building, and I don't know much about the van, and they kind of treat their vans a lot harder than we treat our vans. So I'm going to take the aluminum heads off of this motor, check them out, make sure they're fine. They should be good because the motor ran good. Put them on that, you know, kind of rob whatever parts, timing cover, stuff like that I need off this motor. I'll buy a new timing chain and other stuff for this. I'll get another oil pan coming for this one because I'm just going to go ahead and get the right oil pan for it. And I might throw a little bit of like a stage 1 or 2 cam maybe in it, just because she really likes the lopey noise that the AMX makes. So, you know, I'll keep it pretty tuned. If anything, we'll throw maybe a cam in it. We'll just run the truck intake if it'll fit under the Gremlin hood. I may have to get a car intake for it, but we'll see when that all happens. This transmission, the reason this vehicle was totally retired is it had signs of not shifting well. And when I drained the fluid out, it was really sparkly, so probably gonna have to rebuild that. So it's a 4L60E, and this is out of a 2001, 2002. But I got the whole wiring harness, the computer, everything out of this that I need, you know, to build for the Gremlin. So that's kind of what I want to do on this one. Just I wanted to talk more about the LS's. How I fit them, you know, what I did to fit them into the AMX and what I've done. And so I'll probably kind of tear this motor apart a little bit and take a few more videos of it as I kind of put it back together. But that'll be probably a different day, but we'll see. Just got a few things going on the back burner, and I'm on call 24/7, so you never know when I'll get a call and I'll have to leave and quit making a video for a little bit. But anyway, so there's some information on that for all you people that ask me about that stuff on Instagram, and we'll keep on making some videos and keep on giving more information as I can. Thanks for watching.